let me just take the one in the Black community. The thing of, well, they're killing Black babies, so finally they need to step up and have these babies and stop using it as a contraceptive.
I think that's utter and complete bullshit. And it infuriates me because if I have a lack of contraceptive, whether it be because I have no access to birth control, whether it be a pill, whether it be a uterine device, whether it be a patch, we know that Black women have a lack of access to then even preventative medication or preventative measures. We know that as a fact, that only the more esteemed and wealthy of us have access to those vehicles. That's the first problem. We also know that there's a healthcare problem inside of the Black community as far as not only getting healthcare, but maintaining it from a financial perspective. And we also know that lapsing on healthcare then makes you out of cycle then to then get the monthly pills that you're going to get. Most people are then going to point to Planned Parenthood. If you point to Planned Parenthood, you also have to understand that the funding to Planned Parenthood has been reduced considerably over the years. So even the access to Planned Parenthood has become smaller. If we then deal in rural Black communities or communities where there's limited transportation, oftentimes those healthcare centers are so far away that the amount of resource and money it's going to take and time it's going to take to get there then negates the ability to do so. So the reason that to me from the very beginning is not even tenable is because most Black women who can prevent pregnancies are already using the tools to their advantage that can do so. So that is why to me it's complete and utter BS.
Let's embark on the Arc Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.
What up, wherever you are in the universe? My name is Kaya Nyambi Shivers. Welcome to another segment of Arc Republic News. This is probably one of the most or more important podcasts that I am going to have a discussion with Dr. Sherice Janaye Nelson. How you doing, sis? All things considered.
To be honest with you, sis, I'm really heavy. And I said this to you in the pre-show, right? I'm PMSing. The cycle of my body and the egg that could create a child is now disintegrating. And I think it's just indicative of the fact that the rights that Black men, that Black women in particular, or women of color they're having in this country are disintegrating. We know that misogynoir, which is a combination of the level of racism that Black women in particular face, is at the heart of this, at the heart of these decisions, or this particular decision when it comes to SCOTUS. And as Black women ascend in the structure, the lives of everyday ordinary Black women are just disintegrating. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, a lot of people I've spoken to have said that they're going to take this weekend off. They're going to sleep, they're going to hydrate, they're going to rest, and they're going to come out swinging come Monday morning. In terms of trying to take it all in, understand what's going on, what will be their plans, what will be their plans if themselves or somebody in their family or somebody close to them has an issue that they have to make, and if they have to state jump or whatever that looks like. But we're going to talk
when it comes to state jumping, Dr. Kaya Shivers, you already know people are going to flood and run to the state that you and I were both born in, right? Yes. They are going to be flooding California. And many California companies have made it very clear that they're willing to help people state jump if it comes down to that.
Yeah, we'll talk about the West Coast Force. So I want our listeners to know we're talking about several key decisions that the Supreme Court of the United States made this within this last week or so that are in regards to important critical issues. So we have several we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about the one right now that has literally half of the country up in arms. And right now, as we're talking, protests that are popping up all over the country, and that is the overturning of the historical case Roe v. Wade that gave women the option or the liberty to make a decision on what they would do with a pregnancy, be it planned or unplanned. And so it was based on a court case in Mississippi in which this overturning of Roe v. Wade happened. Sherice, you and I talked about this about 6 weeks ago when the document, the draft leaked, and what the consequences would be. And so, you know, so here we are now in it. I have my thoughts, several thoughts about it, but please give me your initial analysis, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of things.
Well, my initial analysis is that we, in many ways, knew that this was the handwriting on the wall when Brett Kavanaugh was appointed to the bench. And I say that because if we think about the character of Brett Kavanaugh and what he was accused of, it let us know by his eventual confirmation that the bodies and the lives of women, regardless of color, were not of a serious nature in this country. Because anyone with his questionable history should not have been allowed to sit on the highest court in the land indiscriminate of their color. Let's also remember that the person, and I'm calling him a person loosely, and Clarence Thomas, who wrote the major decision in this case, has also had a history, if many people may not remember, the Anita Hill trials, where his I would say his exercise of malehood against her womanhood was taken as slight or as fodder. So what I guess I'm saying here is that that conservatives have built a deep legal bench. And I spoke to you about this previously in a book about how the right or how conservatives made abortion their issue, right? And it was really around the time of Brown versus Board of Education, if that engine started revving up. However, we spoke initially, and I would say still here, that Brett Kavanaugh was the sign, or was the white flag for us to know what was then going to happen. To me, the leaked judicial document was then the sounding of alarm to the rest of America that this is coming down the pike, so be prepared, right? And so I am not surprised. I'm infuriated, but I am not surprised.
Right. And so I think one of my initial readings of the public response is, but people told you, right? And so that, you know, like we people have been talking about this. Well, one, it's been a conversation for years. This dismantling has been going on for years. Our Republic has been reporting on it since 2018. About what it looks like. In 2020, we intensified in our reporting about it. Laws in different states have been eroding consistently. So for me, my initial response to the general public's response that is showing themselves, because of course there's this culture of people not showing themselves of what they really feel, is I don't understand how you are bent over. At this point, you should say, I knew this, I'm prepared, this is what we're gonna do. But people are falling all out. Like, to me, this shows how politics has become so pop culture-y, and that people are not really getting into the serious sinew and tissue and bones of things that really affect them, like, you know what I mean? And so, as we were talking about this in the pre-show, like, it makes me think about, what have I been doing? What have I been doing?
Well, and I can't remember what founding father, and I use that term very loosely as well, because if we had such thing as founding fathers, they created a bastard child in these United States of America. But I can't remember which one said it. He said, "You have a democracy if you can keep it." And my thing is, what it means to have a democracy means you have to have a group of people that are engaged. Now, I've been preaching this from the very beginning, that sovereignty in a democracy then lies with the people. The power actually lies with the people, because they are then electing said representatives. And for those that may not understand how this works, we elected a president who had the opportunity then to then nominate people to a Supreme Court. You have also elected people in a Senate that has used the filibuster to then codify their ability to stack this court. Let us remember that one of the current justices on that court was a stolen justice from the Obama administration for never giving Merrick Garland a hearing in the Obama years. So we have to understand why there's this level of preaching around voting matters. Voting matters because in a democracy, when you do not vote, you have ceded your power. So the question really is, to me, Kaya, it's not what have I been doing, is what have I been doing with my power? Right? Because after I vote, then I have to hold people accountable for what I placed them in an office to do. And what I truly believe is that we have two problems here. There are either people who are disenchanted with the entire process of voting and because they don't feel like there's any outcomes, and so they're not engaged. And then we have another problem of people that go out and vote and then do not hold the people that we have elected into office. We do not hold their feet to the fire. And so that is why we're in the position that we are in. And that is why we're seeing the reduction of rights.
So let's talk about, so this week has really amplified the urgency to really sometimes go just basic 101. Please help people who are listening right now understand, what does the overturning of Roe v. Wade mean in terms of women's health care? Because people always like to just kind of zero in on abortion, which is a central part of it. But could you please help us understand what's happening?
So first we have to understand the Roe v. Wade case, and I'm not going to get into the crux of the details, but essentially the Roe v. Wade case allowed states to make a decision. What it essentially says in Roe v. Wade is that the termination of pregnancy, all the way up to the termination of pregnancy, is then not unconstitutional, right? That is a right that a woman has. And now every state gets to craft what that looks like inside of their state confines, right? So what does that mean for women's health? And why do I start there? Because it has everything to do with women's health, because let's just say for a pregnancy and a direct line to abortion for pregnancy, if it is believed by healthcare officials that a pregnancy could potentially end a woman's life, then based upon what state you are currently living in before this overturn, there could be a medical decision made that if this loss of life of a child versus the life of the mother is then more important, that the life of the mother is then more important than this of the child. This also then, if we're talking about pregnancy, just dealing with pregnancy, that if you have someone who's taken IVF and you have multiple children that are then inside a woman that are being developed, and they go and find that one of those children or that one of that there's a stillborn, or one of those children has passed away, that the removal of that child at any stage is now unconstitutional. So why does that directly link to women's health? It directly links to women's health because we know when it comes to Black women that they are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than any other race of women or ethnic group of women here in these United States. Why does it then connect to women's health? Because we know that Black and brown women are not believed when it comes to pain and pain levels in comparison to their white counterparts. Mm-hmm. Why does this have to do with Black women's health? Because we know that Black and brown women are then denied blood transfusions at a higher level than any other women. So when we're dealing with women's health, we are literally talking about the health care of mothers. That's just with pregnancy. If we move past pregnancy, we are now also then talking about the ability to become pregnant. We are talking about the healthcare conditions that then allow for that child to then live successfully in a womb, right? That a lot of these centers are providing. We're talking about the access to prenatal care. We are talking about access to fresh foods and vegetables. We are talking about the choice of homeopathic medicines used while in the birthing process. We are talking about the ability to choose to have a home birth or not to have a home birth. These are all things that are now on the table with the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yes, I
and that's what the contraceptions. Yes. We're not even in the world of contraceptions. We're just talking about getting pregnant or trying to become pregnant. Just those 2 things.
Right. And also how this decision totally allows the state to make the decision to legislate your body, literally, to make the decision in regards to how in which you decide your future, your family's future. If you want to bring a child into the world, and within hostile terrain, economically, socially, politically, the baby food is gone. I mean, there's a tampon shortage.
There's a diaper shortage. There's a diaper shortage. There's a tampon shortage, and there's a formula shortage.
Yeah. So and also a lot of people don't get. So let's talk about both sides, right? So there is a prevailing side that says, well, finally, this allows the children or babies, innocent lives to come into the world. It is the fault of those who, have sex, and they know what the ramifications possibly might be at the end. So this is something that they've got to live with, and it's a blessing. How do we address what's your response? I have a response. Well, I have multiple responses because it really depends on from what angle the person is coming from. Let me just take the one in the Black community. The thing of, well, they're killing Black babies. This has been, the form of abortion that a lot of Black women have been using over the years. So finally, they need to step up and have these babies and stop using it as a contraceptive.
I think that's utter and complete bullshit.
There you go.
And it can't get any plainer than that. And that infuriates me. And it infuriates me because if I have a lack of contraceptive, whether it be because I have no access to birth control, whether it be a pill, whether it be a uterine device, whether it be a patch, whether it be whatever contraceptive, we know that Black women have a lack of access to then even preventative medication or preventative measures. We know that as a fact, that only the more esteemed and wealthy of us have access to those vehicles. That's the first problem. We also know that there's a healthcare problem inside of the Black community as far as not only getting healthcare, but maintaining it from a financial perspective. And we also know that lapsing on healthcare then makes you out of cycle then to then get the monthly pills that you're going to get. Now, most people are then going to point to Planned Parenthood. Well, if you point to Planned Parenthood, you also have to understand that the funding for to Planned Parenthood has been reduced considerably over the years. So even the access to Planned Parenthood has become smaller. If we then deal in rural Black communities or communities where there's limited transportation, oftentimes those healthcare centers are so far away that the amount of resource and money it's going to take and time it's going to take to get there then negates the ability to do so. So the reason that to me from the very beginning is not even tenable is because most Black women who can prevent pregnancies are already using the tools to their advantage that can do so. I'll give you an example. To get a plan B means that you are nervous about the fact that contraception, that procreation could happen after a sexual encounter. Then you take what's called a Plan B pill, and it is not an abortion pill for those that are also listening. A Plan B pill does this. It essentially retroactively, and this is essential, so do not go get some scientific language to argue me. What it essentially does is it retroactively kills sperm. That's what it does, so that it does not then impregnate the egg. Now, this is something else that people do not understand. There only takes one sperm to hit the egg to then make a baby, and men often, when they ejaculate, have millions of sperm. So the Plan B essentially makes the environment inside of the vagina so difficult for the sperm to live that the sperm die off. That's what a Plan B essentially does. But that pill, if you go to CVS in particular states now, because many states have taken it off their shelves, if you go to any drugstore that is a drugstore, CVS, Walgreens, etc., that pill is $50. Now, how many Black women in the United States can afford to then spend $50 on a Plan B? So that is why, to me, it's complete and utter BS.
And another thing, I'm just thinking about, because of this gap in healthcare that you're talking about, a lot of Black women are going to these clinics for probably the first time in their adult lives around some type of contraception they could use, and finally getting some kind of gynecological care, or seeing an OBGYN for the first time, or the only time they're seeing them is within they're talking about, how do I prevent a pregnancy, or how do I plan my family in a way that I want to plan, because of the gaps in healthcare. So even by dismantling the healthcare system around quote unquote abortion care, essentially takes away a lot of just reproductive health care for women. And reproductive doesn't mean having babies. Your womb and uterus is reproductive, whether you're having a kid or not. So that's another thing for me, that and we know cancer and all of these other fibroids and issues around Black women that affect us disproportionately higher than any other group are now further not going to be met.
Right. We're talking about endometriosis.
Yes.
We are talking about cervical cancer.
Yes.
We are talking about once impregnated preeclampsia.
Yes.
We are talking about high blood sugar or
gestational diabetes.
Gestational diabetes. Those are the major 4 issues that Black women have. And then what is now popped up to be another major issue that had been underreported is blood clotting. Blood clotting when in birth. So that's the bigger thing. And I know that we're not at the subject yet, but I just want to drop this in. My other piece to that is, but we don't give a damn about that baby once it's born. Because we are now allowing the expansion of gun rights that then says that you can take a gun and gun the same baby that you dared me to have or forced me to have, that now it is okay for you to then take a gun, protect yourself, and shoot that same child.
And I'm really interested, like, when is there going to be a really for real public discussion to talk about how this, in some ways, of course, is not as brutal as chattel slavery, but mirrors forced pregnancies in order to me, at the other end, some people are thinking about bolstering the population. Now, we've had this conversation before. Definitely, it's not about bolstering Black and brown populations, but more about dealing with the negative births that are going on in white communities. Like, when are we going to have this really public discourse about that and what it means for real?
Well, we don't want to have that discussion in many ways, because the average Black household is doing what we call the 2+ children, right? So the average Black household, even in the millennial age, has 2+ children. And I know that sounds crazy because there's no half a child, but 2+ children, right? The average Hispanic family is having 3+ children, or 3.5 children. Black families 2.5. The average white family is having 1 child. So the reason that we know for a fact, in many ways, that this is the discussion, or that this is the prevailing driver of what's going on, is the numbers bear it out to be that way. If you look at census data, it really shows this. And when I was doing some work on a presentation that I'll have in Geneva this coming up week, what I saw really in Richmond, California, from a census perspective, is that by 1990, that Hispanics in the area had then almost tripled in size in comparison to the 1980 census. So in 10 years, the Hispanic community had almost tripled in Richmond. And if you go dig a little deeper, it's not just due to migration. It has everything to do with the birth of children. And how can you make that correlation from looking at the census? Because the census decides how many students are going to be in elementary school classrooms. And what we saw was a dramatic number of kindergartens, increased enrollment in this period. So what do we know? We know that is not just from migration, but from then Black and brown, especially brown people, having more children. So we know that's the case. However, anti-Blackness in this country, or throughout the world, as we understand, is not something that we really want to have a conversation about, because it then makes us have to deal with the centrality of whiteness. And that is what this, to me, is all about: the centrality of whiteness. And because they want to shift the paradigm of what it means to be white in this country by pushing white folks to have more children, then everyone else has to suffer.
Yeah, and I'm like, they still don't understand. You cannot never outbreed the mothers of civilization. That is just, it ain't gonna happen. And this is coming after a history of white America importing, at certain times, Europeans into different parts of the country in order to whiten the country over decades, and it still does not work, right? So I'm glad
it doesn't work because they don't have enough children, right? Like,
yeah,
even when you import them,
right
there, and we know this from a European context, because Europe is actually one of the oldest places in the world. Europe is one of the oldest places in the world, because I think their birth rate is negative at this current state. And I should have come prepared to discuss that. But Europe's birth rate is in a downturn, and in no way in an upturn.
I want to say Europe's negative birth rate has been occurring since the 70s. So this is, and this is when we're getting more into the tribalism that a lot of people don't want to talk about, because the people that were having the most children were in those countries that were not deemed necessarily European, like Italy, where you had, and Ireland, right? So Italy and Ireland, you have these very heavily Catholic, having, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 families with these numbers of children, but they represent the rungs of the European society, right? So it's this push is something that is transported, or maybe it's something that is in conversation, with Europe in terms of centralizing. And we all know whiteness, this whole idea of whiteness is something that is just coming up or emerging roughly in the 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, across the world. Well, starting in the United States, and of course, I would say maybe it spills out more late to 1800s, 1900s, when perhaps maybe more Americans are getting into wars and traveling, and this concept is brought, because they talk, the soldiers in World War II talk about how the Germans were treating them better than the white American soldiers. The black soldiers will talk about that. I'm sorry, this was a long discourse, but let me get it back to. So what do you know? Let me get it back to what's going on with Roe v. Wade, because we could get into all of this intellectual stuff, but I really want to get into like the on the ground things. Let me say this, I have seen quite a few men, black men, my brothers, in support of like, this is BS. Like, this is BS. And I must acknowledge the brothers that are rallying behind it. Of course, you have those but I want to acknowledge this solidarity that I see that is growing in terms of this. How does this impact men?
But I think the level of solidarity, I think this is something that is not going to divide us, right? I really think that this is something that is actually going to really get Black men to be, to allow us to rekindle and support one another in a way that hasn't happened. I know that my husband, who's a pastor, and I know we talk about this often, has actually, talked to a lot of his male friends that are pastors and said, what are we going to do, right? This just happened, right? This is something that's still new, I think, to many of us. And what my husband said is that many men are just still in shock. Many Black men are in shock, and honestly, they feel shamed that they have not been paying attention enough to know that this was on the horizon. And now for many of them, it's like we have to do something, and many of them just don't know what to do. So what I've been seeing, I think, on the ground in Louisiana, in Georgia, and then on social media, is just the outpouring of love and support of Black men saying, we know this is a shock, and we understand the prime goal here. And as your brothers, we are here. We just don't really know what to do yet. And that to me has been the general sentiment on the ground, right? People that I've interfaced with, right? Through this time, I've been in Louisiana and in Georgia. And I've had Black men walking up to me like, sis, how are you doing today? Right at the gas station, like, sis, we heard about the decision. How are you doing? And so I don't know if it's going to have this driving away from each other effect that many may have thought it was going to have. I think it's really, at least in my purview, it's really a solidarity thing that I'm seeing far more than a diversion or a diverting of things.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it acknowledges what the conversations that you, Dame, and myself have had in terms of the voting trends of Black men in major elections. And, Dame would always say, why are Black men the ones that are being scapegoated in terms of all things that are misogynistic, when we, out of all the categories of men, Asian, white, Latino, have been the ones who by far significantly voted in the last two major elections, actually consistently, period, for Democrats, for a more progressive candidate. So I'm glad you mentioned that as well. My husband's a barber, and we were in conversation, that barbershop talk, and he's in a multicultural barbershop. He's actually a minority. It's like Latinos, a couple of whites, and it's himself and another Black barber. But I'm giving him language so they could understand, like, do you think this is going to end? They're trying to take away, the whole idea of you being able, or a woman being able to get some birth control. You know what I'm saying? He was like, what? And so that made him stop. I'm like, do you think it's going to stop now? And I'm just breaking about all this stuff. Yeah.
No. Clarence Thomas said in the opinion that contraception and prevention was on the table. I mean, it's
Yes.
literally in the brief. All you got to go do is look at the brief where he says that they are open to then the attack on
Right.
contraceptives and other issues, whether it be gay and lesbian issues
marriage.
or that community, whether it be racial issues as far as equity is concerned, right? In the social sector here in the United States. It was very clear in the brief,
in the language,
what Clarence Thomas, the language. And let me tell you what I guess infuriates me the most. They always get a black man to do it. When we're talking about what they always get the black man.
Say that all the time.
They always get the black man, and they always get the black man to do it. When we're talking about the George Floyd policing bill, a black woman gets up. And Karen Bass gets up with a black woman gets up, is able to mobilize the House and gets Cory Booker on her side. And then who comes to derail it? Tim Scott is his name out of South Carolina.
In South Carolina.
Timothy Scott out of South Carolina, a black man. We have other white male justices on that court, but who writes the major opinion? A black man. Why is Clarence Thomas, whose wife is definitely should be charged for treason, even having the ability to write any level of affirmative? I'm not saying he should be taken off the court, but why is he the person forwarding? Why is he writing the affirmative? There are plenty. Brett Kavanaugh could have written it. Roberts could have written it, right? Because we know the way he voted. So my thing is, and let me be very clear. Roberts most likely didn't want to waste his vote on a yes, because it just would have been a 5-4 and it still would have went the other way. And I'm not saying that Roberts couldn't have made a different decision. I'm just saying that the idea that Roberts' decision was going to make a difference is slim to none. What I am saying is, why the black man?
I want to address that. Let me go back to the contraceptives, the being having access to contraception, and me explaining it to my husband. And I said, let's say theoretically they're still pinpointing or targeting women and legislating their bodies, and say that women have got to get state approval in order to get contraception. I said, you know this, that women by far have always have had to have been the most responsible or the more responsible party when it comes to birth control. So when we are disallowed, what is going to happen? You know what I'm saying? So, this is the type of conversations to help him take this understanding back to the barbershop to talk about what that means.
Because are men going to want to get a vasectomy? Are men going to want to get a vasectomy? That becomes really the question. If contraception then becomes unavailable to me, then are you willing to go get a vasectomy?
Right. And this is not even, so we're talking about pregnancy. We haven't even addressed what do I want to call this? The chronic epidemic of STDs that are going on right now in the country. All right. We haven't even started that one, right? So we're having these conversations, and as well, what we know about communities of color, underrepresented and vulnerable communities, that when there is an unwanted pregnancy, in particular by somebody of a certain age, usually the older parent or is the one that takes the brunt. So I was like, what happens if Taj get pregnant? You know what I'm saying? They come live with us. They come to live with, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have now these, families you're going to have compounds, real life compounds. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but just kind of understanding like the economic stress that is going to uptick, not just for the people who are conceiving, but the families that have got to take these economic stressors and pressures in, when these type of things happen in a post-pandemic world where evictions are high, inflation is crazy, and salary is ridiculously low.
Right, but see, I would even argue, Kaya, that you're taking on the fact that that those children would then come home. That's a collectivist mindset that's really only Black.
That's
right?
true.
White folks love individualism and they love the nuclear family. So they're going to keep those, they're going to find ways to keep them separate. That's us. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
What
that's
we
true.
going to say is,
That's true.
right? And we know this
That's true.
historically, even in our understanding of what it means to be in America and even migration, right? Bring that baby to me. Right?
Mhm.
You go out and economically do what needs to be done. You bring that baby to me. And now that you may be put in a position where you become step grandmother, right? Very soon here, right? That you may be in that position, that's the kind of conversation, that's a realistic conversation. But I would say to you that is more of a cultural conversation, right? That's more Hispanic and Black than it is white anyway.
Okay, so let's finish that up, and we're gonna respond to why the Black man. It's very symbolic, right? It's very symbolic that he does it. But so let's talk about where the white people is gonna send their kids that have these unwanted pregnancy. And we were talking in the pre-show. You were saying this about access and what this Roe v. Wade really is gonna look like in unwanted pregnancies. Could you please expound on that?
Absolutely, because what we already know is that California is still free and clear, right? It's free for all, right? The state that we were born in is now going to become a place, just the same way that we've talked, I think, in previous conversations about sexual tourism. California is going to be really a landing spot, I would then call, for sexual situations to then be absolved or taken care of, right? It's going to be a destination place and it's going to be a haven. And what is it going to do, in my opinion? It's still going to then increase inequities, because it's going to drive people to particular areas to then receive these services that will then increase food, increase housing and lodging, increase apartments. And I think that we might even start seeing a reverse migration. A lot of people had left and fled California during this pandemic. I think that we start seeing a lot of white folks then start moving back in that direction, or getting closer, or finding havens in states where this is available, because they have the liquidity, they are liquid enough to make those types of decisions in a way that Black and brown people just are not.
Right, and I want to say I don't know what this is going to look like, but California, Washington State, and Oregon have all publicly said that they would open up their states in order to help those. So it's going to be like a whole West Coast thing, what that looks like. But of course, more people are going to migrate. California is bigger, has definitely more resources, more attractive in terms of, where to move. So, now these states are beginning to take these very clear positions about, and also corporations, organizations, about how, what they will do in order to help with an unwanted pregnancy. I often think, wow, if there would have been, this is all my philosophy. I think if this country would acknowledge the wrongs and compensate and restore Black people the way that it should, i.e. reparations, it wouldn't even come to this. I feel like that this is a redux of right when there was the women's suffragist movement, and there was a decision that Black people or Black men made. Do Black people get the right to vote via men? And especially, like, this is a Frederick Douglass, right, thing, or do you support the women's suffrage movement, right? And so at the time, Frederick Douglass, who at that point was like, very well known, had a lot of political sway, said, I'm going to push for Black men the right to vote in terms of pushing the Black agenda. And so it's this divide. I know this is maybe off. I hope you're following my train of thought is that when Black people were calling for reparations and equity and all these things, and I'm just talking about recently in a post-George Floyd world, there was a swath of people who were not hearing us, right? And not understanding when we said, when you negate the rights, the civil rights and the citizenship of this group, that shit's gonna trickle down. You're gonna feel some fire. And I think in a lot of ways, this is what we're seeing, because one thing about Black people, you ride for us, we will ride for you, because our whole philosophy, we okay, everybody else is okay. That has always been kind of like how we move, right? Maybe it's because we're at the lowest rung of the hierarchy, whatever it is. But I really believe that this is fallout of Black Lives Matter. Hence, this is why somebody like a Clarence Thomas has to be the symbol, has to be the dragon in blackface to come and present itself to show the world that everybody is not about that Black Lives Matter bullshit. Excuse my language, right? So it's a very clear, and also I feel this is Clarence Thomas having to pay up for when he was confirmed as a justice and he used that I'm a Black man rhetoric, right? In order to, he rallied up these Black men when he was, when Anita Hill was talking about her experience with him. And, he used all that Black rhetoric. In DC, it's all about quid pro quo. Now he has to pay up for this. Okay, that was long-winded, but what are your thoughts on some, all, or whatever?
I think what you're saying is summed up in this phrase by Fannie Lou Hamer. None of us are free until all of us are free.
Ashe. I gotta bring the Ashe, amen, hallelujah. Shit.
And I just feel like that's where we are. Mm-hmm. And what we have thought was going to save us, respectability politics, integration, a normative thought, all of these fancy things we thought were going to save us is not going to save us. Charles, there is at the inside of my book on the Congressional Black Caucus, I talk about a senator who said the only way that we get to full restoration in this country for Black folks is if they have social rights. Not civil rights or political rights, but social rights, because until white people can see them as then equally free as them, they'll never be as free. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying to you is you are exactly right in the idea that our freedoms have been the disdain, I think, of the overall Western society. Mm-hmm, and there has been an attack on those freedoms, not understanding that the erosion of our freedoms is inevitably the erosion of your freedoms.
Exactly. It's not going to go down. You cannot have a society, right, that sometimes maybe
and
almost
Clarence Thomas is our blackface representative of that.
Yes. Oh, clearly, very, very, very clearly. And this is, he's been, of course, there's been decisions over his tenure that have been very important. But this crux within this whole week is like, this is why they put you there. Understand the powers that be got what's that long game? That long game, okay?
And when they first tested him on this, to be quite honest, do you know when the test came for Clarence Thomas about would you do what we want you to do? And nobody wants to talk about it is Obamacare. Because the 5-4 decision did not rest on Clarence Thomas, it rested on Roberts. Roberts, the Chief Justice at the time, is what then allowed Obamacare on its face to stand constitutionally. And that was then the signal, Negro, you will dance the way we want you to dance. Because you, although you have assembled Black men to then ensure your position, you will not do what is necessary in all of constitutional purposes to save this Black man. And now we know we have tested you and known where you're going to stand.
Yeah. So, this, and how do I want to say that? In the conversation we've had these discussions on hegemony, right? So in these conversations of hegemony, Clarence Thomas is the perfect specimen. He's one of the perfect specimens, right? So he sits at the highest, one of the highest powers in the world, right? And he, what's the word you like to use? Capitulates and accommodates.
Consistently.
White
He
power
capitulates
structure.
so much, he doesn't even know who he is anymore.
Yes, yes, yes. He is a perfect, and so he is, but Clarence Thomas is so important because part of the beauty of Black people is that every, you know, if we aren't free, if no one's free, everybody else isn't free. Excuse me, I know I botched that up. But the beauty is that he shows us that Zora Neale Hurston saying, all skin folk ain't kin folk. He ain't banging with you Black folk. He is not, right?
But go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
But this is, to me, and I know I don't want to pivot away from this, but this is exactly why we need to expand the court. Right?
That's why I wanted to bring that up.
But he, to me, it represents why the court needs to be expanded. And the reason is not just because of this decision. I've been preaching for the expansion of the court since we created districts, because number one, there is nothing in the Constitution that says how large or how small the Supreme Court needs to be. And the Supreme Court is dictated and decided by the Congress. It's decided then by our legislative branch. The reason I've been arguing for the expansion of it is this reason. If we, in our understanding of the creation of the Supreme Court, is in the reflection of a European model, we are not in concert with the European model, because the smallest Supreme Court in Europe is 13 people. In Germany, that's the smallest Supreme Court. And I would argue that we need 11. Why do I argue that we would need 11? Because we have 11 districts. We have 11 federal districts. We only have 9 justices. So why do we have 9 justices and not 11 justices to represent the 11 districts? Now we have 2 special districts, and some argue that we need 13. But I strongly say that we need at least 11. And to me, why does Clarence Thomas hook into that? Because Clarence Thomas has for the longest been the fly in the milk, right? And as the fly in the milk, and all of your viewers understand that reference, as the fly in the milk, the nature of the court has essentially turned on and has turned and hinged on him. So if that is the case, you are the exact reason as to why the court needs to expand, because it should not hinge or turn or move, if that makes any sense, based upon you.
Right. So President Joe Biden, according to Press Secretary, what's her name? Jean-Pierre, said that Joe Biden is not considering, nor he will not expand the Supreme Court, which analysts have been saying this is, we just cuss it. I'm gonna cuss up a storm in this one. I just can't hold it, right? I just can't hold it on this one. People are saying, okay, that's gonna be your ass. That is going to be your ass come 2024. That's if he runs. That's it. Well, that's if he runs, right? But theoretically, if he does do that, right, there could be some things that can happen, right? Of course, we have these 2022. Everybody always is going to flip, right? So there's a lot of factors.
Wait.
I
really think that this decision throws all of the conventional wisdom about the seesawing of the legislature in the midterm years. And I'm not saying it won't, but what I am saying is we've thrown it all up into the sky at this point.
Right.
This level of decision throws it all up, and we cannot use conventional wisdom, right, to make this decision. For me, what we need to wait on is what are the polling numbers looking like in September. That's going to give us a better understanding, because this summer's going to be hot. We are getting a taste of it. We've said this, right? You and I have been saying consistently that this summer was going to be hot, and we haven't been wrong yet. So what I'm saying is we don't really understand what these midterms look like until we get out of the summer.
Right. Well, that's definitely a good point. And a lot of, let me tell you, in addition to what these analysts are saying, however, whatever 2022 looks like on a federal level, at the very least, put your local elected officials, vote people in that you can hold accountable and are actually carrying out your interest. So I'm like, okay, they went low, let's go local. They went low, let's go local, right? And pressing that, because we have this conversation about why Karen Bass, who's District 37 California, is now running is in a runoff for Los Angeles mayor. And you made a very good point, because at the federal level, she perhaps doesn't think that she could make as much of an impact as she possibly can in Los Angeles. So that's the other side of, in terms of the analysis, in terms of what the elections may or may not look like.
To be clear, right, I want to clear that I made that assessment based upon all around George Floyd, right? Keith Ellison, so I want folks to think about it this way. Keith Ellison was the first Muslim American to then be confirmed inside of our legislature, inside of the House, out of Minnesota. He leaves and becomes Attorney General, right? He becomes Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, and then convicts Derek, or brings charges against Derek Chauvin and gets a conviction, former CBC member. Karen Bass puts up legislation in George Floyd's name that gets rebuffed and can't get over the finish line, and has now decided that she's going to come out of her district at the federal level to now go into the most heavily resourced police city in the nation, to now try to be able to have the same level of impact, all off of the death of this one man. So that assessment has been made, because we have already seen, if you dig a little bit deeper, that Keith Ellison was able to be far more effective in then providing some level of reprisal or justice for Black people by coming out of the federal apparatus and coming back to the state, while Karen is coming to the local. And I think that's what we're going to start to see. I think we're going to start to see a shift in many ways, then the Democrats, or then liberals, or folks that are in the middle, playing a longer game locally, because I've always said all politics are local.
Right. And so we're going to be following the Roe v. Wade and what the turnout is, like we've been doing.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Arc Republic. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, you can actually keep this mothership going. How? You can make a tax-deductible donation in several ways. One, Cash App us at Arc Republic Media. And you can also go on our website, arcrepublic.com/donate. As well, you can also donate to our fiscal sponsor and our sister organization at Black Farmers Index, that is Cash App, or also go onto their website, blackfarmersindex.com. We are two Black women-owned media organizations who share our profits so folk can thrive.